Hello everybody, Nurse Scott here. Oh, and Mr. Bunny. Welcome to my channel. How you doing? If you don't know me, my name is Scott. I'm a registered nurse with a long history of working in the emergency department. I'm back in school now to get a master's and be a nurse practitioner. But about 20 years ago, I started writing a book, putting together what I knew from emergency nursing and psychology, I have a BA in psychology. And the reason I went to get that degree is because I was like, what's going on with my patients? Why are they doing some of the things they're doing? And so I don't have all the answers, but I put together notes on a book to try to explain some of these phenomena. And I never got around to finishing it, but I realized there's enough information to share with you as a podcast, so that's why I started this podcast. The book and the podcast are entitled The Emergency Mind, The Psychology of Emergency Department Patients, Families, and Staff. And today, we're talking about kids, working with kids, which I have to just a little bit of autobiography here. You know, my first job, I only worked with adults. It was an adult ER. And so kids were a little bit foreign to me. I wasn't yet an uncle. My youngest cousin was already, I think, in high school or college. So I wasn't used to being around kids. And so my next job after that, when I did work with kids, I was a little hesitant, but I soon found out that no, you can't, even though you can't treat kids like little adults. They're really fun they're fun people to work with. There's some really interesting characteristics about kids. I always say I like kids younger than 6 months and older than 2, because once they hit 6 months, they have stranger anxiety, and anybody they don't know comes and says, "Hi, honey, how's baby doing today?" Rah! They scream bloody murder. I'm like, look, I'm a good guy. See, white coat, scrubs, stethoscope. No. And that's normal. That means they know who's in their family group and out of their family group. But it's annoying when you're trying to help a kid and they're just fighting all the way up until, and you can't really negotiate with a kid until they're maybe 2, maybe 3. So 3-year-olds are very cool because they can tell you what's wrong, they can tell you where they hurt or what's going on with them. You can kind of negotiate with them if you want them to do something they don't want to do. They're just curious, and that goes for school age kids as well. They're just very curious, and I love that. You can really tap into their curiosity and make that work for your advantage. Instead of being so nervous about what's going on, you can explain what you're doing, like starting an IV, and they're like, well, I've never learned that before. You're going to do what with that needle? That's my technique for doing that, and it's worked. I've told patients, now I have to draw some blood, so I need to use a needle. It'll hurt for a second, but I'm going to tell you everything I'm doing as I do it, so no surprises, okay? And I had Mr. Bunny to make a point that, the approach of, Mr. Bunny says it's time to take your medicine. No, just no. If it's a little baby, you might try to distract him, like look over here, look over here. But, going up to a kid of really any age and going, Mr. Bunny is here, Mr. Bunny says you need your medicine. I don't believe in that. I believe in talking to kids like people, not like adults necessarily. But I don't use that motherese. It's okay, I'm a nurse. Can you open your mouth for me? Oh, what a good girl you are. I use that tone of voice with my dogs sometimes, but not with kids. So good for distraction, not good as a character in the patient's care. So I'm going to put Mr. Bunny over here. I wonder if he can sit over here in the background for this video. One of the things I do, this is extra material. This is not in the chapter that I'm going to read to you in a moment. Tapping into kids' curiosity can work to your advantage. So starting an IV is stressful for even adults. But I've had kids that I've had to start IVs on, and I just tell them, look, here, I'm not going to surprise you. I'll tell you when it hurts. It's going to hurt for a second, and then it won't hurt. It's not going to hurt and then keep hurting. Okay, it's one second of hurt, like, ouch, that hurt, and then we're okay again. So that's different than I'm going to be in pain for the next 20, 30 minutes. I think kids, at least of a certain age, can comprehend that. Then I get them involved. I say, okay, first thing I'm going to do is put the strap on your arm like this. It's a little tight, but it doesn't hurt. Okay? And now I said, I'm looking for a vein. Do you see on my arm here? Do you see these? Like there? I'm looking for one of those on you because that's where the blood is. I wonder if you can help me. And they'll help. It's it's funny. It's like they don't want the IV, but they'll help you put one in. And they're like, oh. And I had one little girl go, oh, how about like this one? And I said, Yeah, that looks like a good one. And the mom was being a pain. Mom was just like, doesn't it hurt more when you put it in the hand? I'm like, shut up. I've got buy-in from the kid. And yes, in general, it does, but it doesn't have to hurt, anyway, it's more important that I get her buy-in. Um, and it was perfectly fine for what we needed. So I said, okay, yeah, that's the one you pick. That's the one we're going to use. Now it's her vein. She's involved in this. And I said, okay, I'm going to rub you with alcohol. Okay, we're going to let that dry. Okay, all right, now I've got the needle. It's sharp. You don't have to watch. You can watch if you want to, but you don't have to, because some kids like to see it coming and not be surprised. And other kids are like, no, no, no. I don't. And adults too. I don't want to see this. Just tell me when it's over. Me personally, I don't, I kind of watch, but don't watch. But I always say, just like if you're giving me a shot, just tell me when you're going to do it. Like, okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3. And then tell me when it's out, like for a shot. Tell me when it's out, because otherwise I'm like, it's in there, it's in there, it's in there. Like, they're like, honey, I took it out 30 seconds ago. And I'm like, well, you didn't. So I always tell them that. Tell me when it's in, tell me when it's out. Some people like to watch. Kids being very curious sometimes want to watch everything, and that's fine. And so, yeah, so I put the needle in. I'm like, okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Boom. She's like, ah. I'm like, okay. I said, that hurt. Now, does it hurt now, though? I told you it only hurt for a second. Does it still hurt? It doesn't hurt anymore, does it? Kind of leading them. No, I guess it doesn't. Okay, but you did a good job. Okay, so I'm just, now you won't, there's nothing else that's gonna hurt. I'm gonna just put tape on it and connect it, and I'm gonna get some blood out of it. Do you wanna see what color your blood is? Do you know what color your blood is? And yeah, oh, look how red that is. It's very dark. I said, I used to have a car that color. My first car after college was Cabernet Red. And just engaging their curiosity is so helpful. Instead of something being done to them, they're not being like held down and having things done to them. Things are being done that they're involved in. They're part of that process. So I didn't include that in the chapter, I don't think, as I recall. It's been a while since I read this chapter, this script, but just wanted to offer that to you. So without further ado, this is chapter 10, Ouchies, Boo-Boos, and Tummy Aches. Kids in the emergency department. Interacting with children in the emergency department can be a unique and rewarding experience for healthcare providers. Children are naturally curious, funny, and brutally honest, but also have unique emotional and developmental needs that must be considered when providing care. It's important to understand that children are not little adults and that their reactions to being in the hospital environment can be very different from those of adults. Developmental stages. Developmental psychology is a study of the stages of human development and the ways in which children progress and mature over time. By understanding the milestones that children typically pass through during their development, healthcare providers can better anticipate how they might react in the emergency department. Newborns to 2-year-olds, commonly referred to as infants, typically go through the early stages of development where they're developing trust and attachment with their primary caregivers. During this stage, they may experience separation anxiety when separated from their parents and experience distress in unfamiliar surroundings. Additionally, they may be physically and emotionally reliant on their caregivers, so their reactions in the emergency department may largely be influenced by the behavior of their parents. It's important for healthcare providers to understand and recognize these early developmental milestones and to make efforts to keep the infant calm and comforted. For example, by allowing the parents to stay with the infant during the examination or treatment. Children between the ages of 2 and 4 are in the early childhood stage of development. During this stage, they're naturally curious and love to explore their surroundings. However, they can also be easily overwhelmed by new and unfamiliar experiences, such as being in the emergency department. They may also experience separation anxiety, feeling frightened and upset if they're separated from their parents or caregivers. Children in this stage may also have difficulty expressing their emotions and may rely on crying or other physical displays of distress to communicate their discomfort or fear. In these cases, it's important for healthcare providers to be patient and understanding and to take extra time to explain procedures and offer comfort to the child and their family. Children between 5 to 7 years old may experience real or imaginary fears and physical symptoms when in the emergency department. They may have difficulty separating from their caregivers and experience separation anxiety, which can manifest as crying, clinging, or other signs of distress. They may also be afraid of unfamiliar objects or people and may be overwhelmed by the new and unfamiliar environment of the hospital. During this stage of development, children are beginning to develop more advanced problem solving and cognitive skills, but they still rely heavily on their caregivers for comfort and stability. Children between the ages of 7 and 10 may experience a more advanced level of anxiety and self-awareness. At this stage, children are able to understand and process complex information, which can sometimes lead to free-floating anxiety or fear about things that are not fully understood. However, they are also beginning to develop their own sense of self and autonomy, which can sometimes cause frustration when their control is limited in the hospital environment. It's important for healthcare providers to recognize these cognitive and emotional developments in this age group and approach their care with empathy and understanding. Children between the ages of 10 and 13 are typically moving into early adolescence and are experiencing many physical and emotional changes. During this time, they're developing their own sense of identity, as well as learning to deal with the challenges and pressures of growing up. Children in this age range may also be starting to question authority and push back against rules and expectations set by adults. In the emergency department, they may feel anxious and stressed, and they may struggle to articulate their feelings or needs. It's important for healthcare providers to be patient and understanding with these children, as they may be more difficult to engage with than younger children. By being supportive and showing empathy, healthcare providers can help to ease the stress and anxiety that children in this age range may be feeling during their time in the emergency department. In the developmental stage of late adolescence, which ranges from 13 to 17 years old, children are entering the teenage years and starting to develop their own personal identity. They're often trying to become more independent from their parents and become more self-reliant. During this stage, adolescents may experience feelings of insecurity and self-doubt and may also struggle with defining their values and beliefs. In the emergency department, adolescents may experience a mix of emotions ranging from embarrassment or shame to anger and frustration. They may also be more resistant to medical procedures or treatments, especially those that are embarrassing, as they seek to assert their independence and assert control over their own bodies. It's important for healthcare providers to be mindful of these emotional changes and to work with the adolescent to find ways to provide care that respects their autonomy and their desire for control. Children in crisis. A visit to the emergency department can range from a simple deviation from a child's routine to a major stressor. When under extreme stress or when in a crisis, children react differently depending on their developmental age. Infants, birth to 2 years. Infants in crisis may become clingy and cry frequently. They may be unable to understand what's happening, but they can sense the stress and uncertainty around them. They may also experience changes in sleep patterns, feeding habits, and behavior. Toddlers, 2 to 4 years, may become clingy and experience separation anxiety when they're separated from their primary caregivers. They can become more clingy and whiny. They may be afraid of unfamiliar objects or people and may resist being examined. Young children, 5 to 7 years, can experience real and imaginary fears as well as physical symptoms. It's at this stage that they start to develop a more intense understanding of the concept of death and may have fears related to it. Older children, 7 to 10 years, can experience free-floating anxiety and may become more aware of their own physical symptoms. They can become easily frustrated, especially if they feel powerless or out of control in a crisis. Preteens, 10 to 13 years old, have a more complex understanding of what's happening and may be better able to articulate their feelings. However, they may also feel overwhelmed by their emotions and may become anxious or irritable. Adolescents, 13 to 17 years old, are often self-conscious and may feel embarrassed or humiliated by certain situations. They can become more resistant to being examined or treated and may be less willing to accept help from healthcare providers. In times of crisis, children may also regress to an earlier developmental stage. This can involve a return to behaviors that they had outgrown, such as thumb sucking or temper tantrums. This is often an indication of a heightened level of fear or stress in the child and can be distressing to parents and healthcare providers. In order to effectively care for pediatric patients in the emergency department, healthcare providers must be able to understand the child's developmental stage, anticipate potential emotional reactions, and respond in a supportive and calming manner. This can help to create a more positive experience for both the child and their family and can improve the outcomes of the medical treatment. Fear of stethoscopes and white lab coats. One of the key challenges in caring for pediatric patients in the emergency department is managing their fear and anxiety. Children may experience fear or anxiety at the sight of a stethoscope or a white lab coat, which can be due to classical conditioning. The unique sight of a person in a white coat or with a stethoscope can be mentally paired with unpleasant experiences, such as being examined or given a shot. This fear can be especially challenging for children who are already in a state of crisis, as their heightened emotions make it difficult for them to cooperate with medical procedures. Parents and caregivers. In order to foster a positive and supportive environment for pediatric patients, healthcare providers must also be mindful of the role of parents and caregivers. These adults often play a crucial role in the child's experience in the emergency department, serving as an important source of comfort and security. The behavior and reactions of parents and caregivers can greatly impact the child's experience. For example, if parents are visibly anxious or upset, this can cause the child to become fearful and resistant to examination. On the other hand, if patients are calm and supportive, the child is more likely to be cooperative and relaxed. Parents and caregivers may react differently when their child is a patient in the emergency room. For some, the situation can bring up intense emotions such as fear, worry, anger, or frustration. They may become overly protective of their child, making it difficult for healthcare providers to perform the necessary medical procedures. On the other hand, some parents may become detached, appearing indifferent to their child's situation, which can also pose a challenge. Implications for clinicians. To mitigate the natural fear some children experience in the emergency department, healthcare providers can take a number of steps to help children feel more at ease. One strategy is to explain the purpose of the examination, including what will happen and why it's important. For example, a healthcare provider might explain that the stethoscope is used to listen to the child's heartbeat and that the examination is necessary to help determine what might be causing the child's illness. Another strategy to use is to use a less intimidating stethoscope, such as one designed specifically for children, or to approach the child in a friendly and non-threatening manner. For example, a healthcare provider might introduce themselves, explain what they're going to do, and give the child a chance to ask any questions they may have. In addition to understanding the typical developmental milestones, it's equally important for healthcare providers to be aware of the child's individual temperament and personality. Children can be unique in the way they respond to stress, fear, and unfamiliar situations, and a one-size-fits-all approach may not be effective. Providers should keep in mind that every child is different and may have different levels of tolerance, fear, or anxiety. Providers should have realistic expectations about what a child is capable of and not expect them to act like an adult or like a child in a more advanced stage of development. Instead, they should be prepared to adapt their communication style and examination techniques to best meet the needs and abilities of each individual child. For example, a child who is naturally shy or reserved may need extra support and reassurance, while a more outgoing child may be more willing to participate in the examination. By taking a thoughtful and compassionate approach to caring for pediatric patients in the emergency department, healthcare providers can help to reduce the stress and anxiety associated with being in the emergency department. In these stressful situations, it's important to acknowledge the emotional state of the parents as well, and work with them to find a balance between ensuring the safety and well-being of the child while also addressing the emotional needs of the family. Providers should provide parents with clear explanations of what's happening and what to expect, and involve them in the decision-making process as much as possible. In extreme cases, it may be necessary to bring in additional support for the parents, such as a counselor or social worker, to help them cope with the situation and provide them with the necessary resources and support to ensure the best outcome for their child. Ultimately, ED clinicians must treat both the child and the parent. The goal is to ensure that the child's experience in the emergency department is as positive and stress-free as possible. By taking into account the unique emotional and developmental needs of children, as well as the role of parents and caregivers, healthcare providers can provide the best possible care and support to pediatric patients and their families. I think that was pretty interesting. I hope you did too. I hope you learned something. And if you are a clinician that works with kids, you know what I'm talking about. If you're a clinician that doesn't work with kids, don't dismiss it. I've talked to people who are like, I'm not working with kids, I'm never working with kids, and I'm like, have you tried it? Kids are actually pretty cool, and it depends. If you're dealing with kids with cancer who often die because of the cancer, maybe you're not ready for that. Maybe that's not something you want to. That's not your role in the world, and so much respect to those who do that. But yeah, kids are unique, and kids can be a nice break from grumpy adults. Even grumpy kids can be a break from grumpy adult patients. So, again, leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think about taking care of pediatric patients, taking care of kids. Like the video if you've liked it. Subscribe to the channel and subscribe to the podcast if you're listening on audio-only podcast. Thanks for spending this time with me, and I will see you next time.